nice down here.
Sure is.
Turn on that record about Florida.
Follow the sun, you'll find it down in Florida. Anywhere in Florida, sunny, sunny Florida. Follow the sun, it's shining down in Florida, so that's where you can look for me. Follow the sun, it's nice and warm in Florida. Balmy, balmy Florida, tutti fruity Florida. Join in the fun and meet me down in Florida underneath a big palm tree. You can have the ice, yes, and you can have the snow. They don't have any of it down this way. Early in the fall, Miami starts to call, and here I'll stay until the 1st of May. Oh, follow the sun, they've got it down in Florida, everywhere in Florida, sunny, sunny Florida. Follow the sun and look for me in Florida, for that's where I am sure to be. For that's where I am sure to be.
There were bathing casinos on Miami Beach at the time, and those were down here, what we now call South Point Drive, but then was Biscayne Street. People would come over from the mainland, from Miami, by ferry. There were no bridges. And then when they got here, they would go to the beach houses, change their clothes, get into bathing suits, and then after they got through swimming for the day, they'd go get dressed and go back again to Miami. Now they had Ferris wheels and entertainment for the children, and people would just spend the day. It was sort of like entertainment centers. They all sort of gravitated around the pools, and there was no gambling. My grandfather opened up what would be considered today a fish and chips within Smith's Casino itself, and that was the beginning of Joe's. 1919, 1918, they opened up their own restaurant. Our signature, our icon, is the two of them, my grandparents, standing in front of the restaurant. The streets were all wooden. You can see the open lots, and you can see this little tiny house, and they turned the house into a restaurant. They opened up a seaquarium on 5th Street and Alton, and they were doing a lot of research work in the marine world. They had 2 ichthyologists working there, and they came over with some stone crabs that they had trapped, and they brought them to my grandfather, who had the only place to cook on the beach. They brought them to him, and he boiled them for them, and they found out they were edible, and that was relatively the beginning of Joe's stone crabs. Carl Fisher was building north of Fifth, and there was a great deal of anti-Semitism from the Carl Fisher group. The Loomis brothers were 2 brothers who came down and decided to develop, but their development was south of Fifth, and so all of the Jewish people lived south of Fifth. That's why Joe's is where it is, and we've just never moved. Joe's is in the same spot as it was 100 years ago.
I am the daughter of Rose and Henri Levy. He developed the north part of Miami Beach. He came from Cincinnati, Ohio. After 1 month in beautiful Miami, he decided to invest in Miami Beach. And he went to see Carl Fisher, whose office was on Lincoln Road. Mr. Fisher was not very amiable to talking to my father, as he was pretty anti-Semitic and my father was Jewish. My father was so incensed at the conversation that he was determined to do bigger and better for North Beach, which was the area he chose because Carl Fisher's property stopped around 63rd, 64th Street. So my father's first investment was at 65th Street. It was modeled after several French cities. He wanted to do something that reminded him and brought to the people of Miami Beach resort areas that he remembered going to as a child. Deauville, Trouville, those were all French beach resorts that he went to. And that led to his naming the streets French names. The Center Plaza contains a fountain, which is so typical of the French resort areas and beach areas. He filled in all of Normandy Isle from 2 spoil islands that he purchased for $250,000. My father maintained several, I call them shacks, he called them sales offices. At the time, they were standing on absolutely empty land. He had several very large touring cars, and he would come and pick up the tourists that were then staying at the various hotels. The idea was that he would bring them up to this land and he would entertain them for the day. They would have food, picnic baskets. He had a very nice relationship with some of the Seminole Indian chiefs, and they would come over and they would do alligator wrestling. And he also had the beginning of the beauty contests held on this property, the 1924 Miss Miami Beach. It was a complete day's outing, and it really took a day. Miami Beach was hit with a very severe hurricane in 1926. The hurricane definitely put a big dent in Miami Beach's advances. There was no activity real estate-wise for a couple of years. There was a land bust. Prices went bottom, and a lot of people got wiped out that didn't have that much money behind them. And then, of course, 1929 brought the 29 stock market debacle. And it wasn't really until about 1935 that the beach started picking itself up again. Later on, many years later, in the 30s, he began building houses on Normandy Isle. That was his idea, was to get people interested in coming back to Miami. There was a lot of activity going on at that time around there as well. A lot of construction that was being done. My father was such a far thinker. He had a little black book, and in it he wrote that Florida will be built from Key West to Jacksonville. He saw it coming. He wanted to be right there to see it develop.
I was shipped to Miami Beach, Florida for military duty. The hotels were our dorms. The clubs were our classrooms. They put every bit of pressure on you that they could. How you sat, how you walked, everything. There was physical fitness, of course. That was a big deal every day to get out on the obstacle course. Being out on that course at that time of day is brutal. You had to stand out in that hot sun, and the only way to get out of that was to pass out. Every afternoon at 2 o'clock, we had a parade. We'd march up and down Collins Avenue singing. I was the only black man in the outfit. There were 5 others stationed in Miami Beach, but over 3,000 whites. The beach was blacked out during that period. No lights on because of the German subs. At times, we would be placed on the beach, given a rifle and 50 rounds of ammunition. We'd walk and patrol the beach all night. Next morning, you could get in the shower, take a bath, and go to class. Veronica Lake, the movie star, was coming to town. I'd been selected as one of the guards to escort her. The day of her arrival, the first sergeant comes out and says, "Williams, the city manager will not permit you to participate in this activity." In the night, at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, a cadet would come in and shout, "Air raid!" and you had to jump out of your bed and get under your mattress. Clark Gable, he could have come into the service as a major, but he chose to go through training. So he went through the same rigorous training that we did, and we all admired him for it. Every 2 weeks, they would have to move him. The ladies would find out where he lived, and all night there'd be women outside the hotel. We graduated. All the guys had their girlfriends, wives, and whatnot. I could not have mine because no blacks were permitted on the beach unless they had something showing they were employed.
I first arrived here in 1944. This was fresh and new, and it had beautiful pastel colors. I might say that I didn't even know what a pastel color was, and everything was white and green and pink and blue. One thing I remember so clearly were circles. I never saw any circles in my hometown or in the city of New York. I went into business with my father, and what we were doing is building as general contractors up and down Miami Beach. Miami Beach became a prolific generator of hotels. Every year, at least one major hotel opened up. A significant event was the change of Collins Avenue. 1945, there was a whole series of major mansions, it was one after another. Beautiful old houses, but these were big and elaborate houses. That created these enormous oceanfront sites, and along there came the Fontainebleau, the Eden Rock, and the Doral. Then after that, you saw a whole string of condominiums go in. And the next hotel that was built in that row is the Playboy Hotel. It was a boom here in the 50s in condominiums along Collins Avenue and facing the water. Morris Lapidus was a highly respected architect, and he designed the Sanssouci and the Saxony Hotel. But they were very ordinary structures, but they were the first luxury hotels built on Miami Beach post-war. The Fontainebleau has lots of money to work with, and that was different. It was really unique at that moment on Miami Beach. Novak built something that was absolutely magnificent. The building was curved, the views were spectacular, no matter where you were in that building, and the public areas were just beautiful. The interior of the lobby with the grand staircase, it doesn't really go to anything that's that critical, but it's beautiful. And the two-tiered lobby was really beautiful. People came to Miami Beach to spend their money in hotels and restaurants and nightclubs, and to gamble. Gambling was not legal, but every hotel that I can remember on Miami Beach had its bookmaker. Bookmakers generally were located in a cabana. That was the afternoon place when horse racing was taking place. For people to sit around their cabana with racing forms that were sold in every hotel newsroom. People just sitting there reading their racing form, sitting in their own cabana reading a racing form, sitting on a beach chair or what have you, and the guy would come by like the waiter did and see if we wanted any drinks. There was very little interference from anybody. I don't remember bookmakers down here getting in any trouble whatsoever at any time. But there was a tremendous economic force for gambling. People wanted it at that time. 1945 to 1955 was the heyday of the nightclubs. 3 major nightclubs that were very, very prominent and active. The Latin Quarter, the Copa, and the Beachcomber. What made these clubs so important is they played all the major acts and all the famous name entertainers of the era. I'm talking about Jimmy Durante, Sophie Tucker, Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra. That was Miami Beach. And those clubs did huge amounts of business. The hotels, many of them started booking primary acts and secondary acts. So guests of the hotel could see those acts in the hotel. So they drew people in from outside to see shows. And the result of that was nightclubs ceased.
I arrived in Miami in 1957, hoping to break into radio. Got a job at a small station on Miami Beach, WAHR. Started broadcasting May 1st, 1957. Miami Beach was exploding in all the best ways. Hotels were booming. Major acts, Harry Belafonte would change the racial culture. The beach hotels did not allow blacks. That changed all when Harry Belafonte worked. I was on WIOD radio, and Jackie Gleason came to town in the early 60s. I think it's around 63. So I was at Jackie's house one day, and he asked me what was impossible in my line of work, and I said Frank Sinatra would sit down with me for 3 hours on my interview show on WIOD. And Jackie said, no problem. When is he here? And I said, well, he opens next week at the Fontainebleau. And he doesn't work on Monday nights. And Jackie said, okay, next Monday you got him. And I said, how can you? He said, no problem, Larry, you got him. So I went back, I told the radio station I got Frank Sinatra coming next Monday night. I started to promote it on the air. On Friday afternoon, the station manager called me and he said, listen, we're a little embarrassed here. We're taking a full-page ad in the Miami Herald. For Sunday, we've called the Fontainebleau. We've asked for Sinatra. He hasn't returned any calls. Are you sure he's going to come Monday? I said, well, I'll call Jackie. I called Jackie, and he got a little mad. He said, are you questioning me, pal? I said, okay, no, Jackie. We hung up. I said, Jackie says he's coming. So they ran the ad, and the next day it's Monday, and everybody's nervous, and nobody went home from the station. The secretaries, the salespeople, they all stayed. I went on at 9 o'clock. At 5 to 9, we're all standing around. This limousine pulls up. Out steps Frank Sinatra and his press agent. They come walking up the stairs to the radio station. The press agent says to me, I don't know how you got him, because he pays me not to go on. Frank did not do interviews. Frank said, which one is Larry King? I sheepishly raised my hand and said, I am. And he said, okay, let's go. And we walked into the interview room. Now it's 3 hours I've got with this #1 star in the world who doesn't do interviews. And I began by just simply saying, my guest is Frank Sinatra. Why are you here? Which I thought was direct and being honest with the audience. And Sinatra said, well, about 5 years ago, I was working at Ben Max's Town and Country Club in New York. And on closing night, I had laryngitis. And I called up Jackie Gleason, asked if he would sit in for me. And Jackie came and did my show. And as Jackie was leaving, I leaned over into his limousine. I said, Jackie, I owe you one. 4 or 5 years later, I open at the Fontainebleau. When I get to the hotel, I get a message. Call Jackie Gleason. I called Jackie, and he said, Frank, this is the one. Frank enjoyed the interview, and at the end of the night, he said to me, why don't you come see my show? I was making about $100 a week, and I didn't have any money. He says, come on, Friday night, you're my guest. Ringside. Dinner. Oh boy, was that a great opportunity for me, and I knew that any girl I invited would be a great night for me. So I invited this girl, and I had $20 to my name. I had $5 to pay for parking and $15 to tip the waiter, and that's it. I had no money left. We're at the hotel. Frank sings in the middle of his act. He mentions that he'd been interviewed by this young man. He thought it was a great talent. Larry King is here tonight. Would Larry's like to stand up and take a bow? I was eating my Cherries Jubilee dessert. I couldn't believe that he introduced me. I hit the table, the Cherry's Jubilee spilled all over me. Everybody laughed. I had Cherry's Jubilee dripping all over me. The date was very impressed with the whole thing. Frank never forgot that. And by the way, when I was driving the date home, I knew I was going to have a great night. But on the way home, she said, "Why don't we stop for some coffee?" I have no money in my pocket. So we pull into White Castle, and she said, "Well, get 2 coffees to go." I go inside, I don't have any money. I go to the bathroom, I go back out, I get in the car, and I said, "They can't change a $100 bill." It was a wonderful night.
In 1968, the Republican convention was in Miami Beach, and the Democratic convention was in Chicago, and it was a major debacle. I mean, it turned into a police riot.
Republicans and Democrats don't usually agree on much, but they did agree on one thing. Miami Beach was the place they wanted to hold their national convention.
1972, everybody decided to come to Miami Beach. The Democratic convention was in July. We were in the middle of the Vietnam War. Bombs were going off, planes were being hijacked. I mean, all kinds of stuff was going on. Rocky Pomerantz was the longtime chief of police. He became the most famous cop in America. He took huge precautions to make sure it was safe and went well. He designated Flamingo Park on South Beach as a free speech area for protesters. So instead of just trying to keep them away, he gave them a place to be. And then the protesters were so colorful. They had hippies and zippies and yippies.
A couple of months ago, the yippies said that 10,000 nude people would march down Washington Avenue during the conventions. But for those who are looking forward to that, they'll be disappointed. The yippies say that will not come off now.
You know, they just camped out there. They had tents pitched because it was hot, and everybody just strolled around. And they had a big, huge chain-link fence around the convention center. They had not only the Beach Police Department, but they had FBI agents, the Secret Service, FDLE, lots of other local police departments, Army intelligence officers. Everybody and their brother was here to keep the peace. The first one, the Democratic convention, you know, it wasn't bad at all. Things went extremely well. The Republican convention came in August. The Vietnam veterans against the war, they marched down to the high school, Miami Beach High School. You know, school was out for the summer, so they marched down to the high school where 750 National Guard troops were stationed, but they kept them hidden until they needed them. And the Vietnam veterans against the war sneaked into the building, went up to the roof, and hung an upside-down American flag there, you know, as a sign of country in distress, and pulled that off. I looked up one day and saw some people on the roof. One guy had a long gun, the kinds of long-distance rifles, you know, the snipers would use, and they were going to keep people safe, you know, the politicians as they came and went and everything. And so when I mentioned it to Rocky Pomerantz, he insisted there were no snipers because he didn't want that to get out and be in the paper, and I think it was, and he was upset. And he totally denied it, no snipers on the roof. And I said, well, somebody was up on the roof with a long gun, you should check it out. They wanted to try to harass some of the delegates, and when they saw a car go by, they would try to yell at it or bang on the car. They blocked traffic at the Fontainebleau. There were arrests up there. There was a fire at the Playboy Hotel. Some militant females who were marching down Collins Avenue had gotten into the Playboy Hotel and set a bed on fire. They did arrest a couple hundred people who were doing vandalism and stuff, but nothing really serious. It was relatively minor until all hell broke loose last night. You know, the cops had been sort of restrained. They were told to be nice to everybody, even the protesters, and they were. But at the very end, they've been restrained for so long, they've got to vent a little, and they did. There's always some problem at the end because they've got all these toys to use and all the gas grenades, and now they have tasers. They didn't then, but luckily. We were all like hemmed in at the park. I didn't want to leave until everybody else had gone to make sure nothing happened. It was very dark, and suddenly all these lights came on. We were surrounded by police cars that had just quietly pulled up without lights, and they were yelling something over the bullhorn. I think they wanted us to leave or quietly or something. And all of a sudden it was tear gas, and I saw this highway patrolman who just picked up this hippie girl, She hadn't done anything. She was trying to leave, and he picked her up, held her over his head, and smashed her down on the pavement. And I was sure that she had to be seriously injured because the crowd was getting pushy and panicky and running away and everything. But luckily nobody was killed. I didn't hear of any serious injuries. So Rocky Pomerantz pulled it off while the world was watching. So it was a triumph for him, a triumph for Miami Beach. The conventions, however, never came back. I'm not sure why.
70s were difficult times in Miami Beach. Miami Beach was in its major state of decline at that time. Lincoln Road had fizzled, the hotel business was terrible, tourism wasn't here.
South Beach was an elderly refuge. They came down here to spend the rest of their lives.
I mean, people called me Sonny at that time. Friends were very critical of my wife and I for moving to Miami Beach in the 70s. They thought we were crazy.
Loomis Park was their territory in South Beach. The women used to go and sit in the park and play mahjong. Some of them just sat there and gossiped for the day. They were a vibrant community. In 1979, I got very involved in the Art Deco movement. It was at a time when the beach was near bankruptcy. It was failing.
There were major efforts towards redevelopment at that time.
So they created a committee. It was called the Redevelopment Agency. It was this whole south of Fifth area.
I was on that redevelopment authority. The chair was a good friend by the name of Steve Muss. Steve actually was the owner of the Fontainebleau Hotel. They came up with this very grand plan.
They were going to recreate a miniature Venice, Italy.
Build canals through it, hotels as part of it, and so forth. It was a beautiful plan.
It was as ridiculous as it sounds. The city commission put in place rules that didn't allow people to do anything to their buildings. The moratorium created a slum.
I was an opponent of the plan. I was somewhat vocal. It was controversial because it dispossessed the senior citizens. I mean, they didn't care about the senior citizens. They didn't care about them.
It was a social, environmental, architectural, and community disaster. The old people fought back. They were strong. They had good leadership, some tough New Yorkers.
It was really a David versus Goliath situation here. And I sort of straddled it. I was more on the Goliath side, somewhat, with great sympathy for what these people were doing.
It was costing the city millions of dollars to condemn the properties down there. The people in the community said, what kind of nonsense is this? The commission finally got rid of that redevelopment agency and ended it.
What a horrible disaster has been visited on Miami Beach with that South Beach Redevelopment Authority.
Barbara Capitman and her son came down and bought the Cardozo. They came from New York, so they understood the value of preserving landmark places. They tried to restore it. This is at a time when Ocean Drive was dead, not a car, not a soul. They opened a cafe. People started to come. Young people, designers, and people who understood preservation came and celebrated the restoration. Those Art Deco buildings were built to connect with the environment that they were in. Some of them looked like little ships with the little portholes. The porches were like the bow of the ship. They're not gorgeous buildings, but they are symbols of their time and history, specific to here.
It was the beginning of an interesting movement here, headed by some private citizens, one by the name of Barbara Capitman.
Barbara would go endlessly telling everybody how important it is to save what we had.
She was one of these women who didn't know what the word no meant.
At the time, she was ridiculed. Preservation was not even, they used to call it the P word. It was just not accepted. The Chamber of Commerce, they didn't want to hear about preservation. There were those from here who called it the Art Deco. had to put up with that for a long time. She had Leonard Horowitz identified colors to paint the buildings. They weren't original colors, but they brightened up the buildings so people could see that they weren't just run-down old buildings. She had the vision, she had the tenacity. She got the National Register to accept the Art Deco district in its entirety. That was monumental, but it didn't save the buildings. You could demolish them anytime. That was the beginning of the upward battle for the historic district. Some of the famous developers opposed it and demolished some of the very best hotels. She started the Miami Design Preservation League. You have to have the vision that it is important to save the roots upon which this city was built in 1915. And then you work from there. You modernize, but you don't throw away the history of the city.
The so-called sun and fun capital of the world has deteriorated into a slum and bum capital.
I've had my modeling agency for 35 years here on South Beach. As I saw the beach evolving, we moved our offices to Ocean Drive. It was a pretty scary place. A lot of crazy people on Ocean Drive at night especially, beer bottles and liquor bottles all over the beach. It was a shame. We moved in next to the Versace building. I used to get yelled at because I'd throw my garbage in Gianni's dumpster, and he'd yell at me, "Don't use our dumpster." A lot of the Germans and French clients, which had a lot of money in some of the biggest catalogs in the world, were going to Marbella and Cape Town. And so what we did is we had an agent that we sent to promote Miami Beach as a new fashion lit beach runway, sort of speak. They had never seen Miami Beach, and they loved the old buildings and the way they were, all the Art Deco buildings and the colors and everything like that. So we promoted and promoted and promoted, and lo and behold, it paid off tenfold. Bruce Weber's shoot on top of the Breakwater Hotel was one of the big deals. It was a national campaign, national ad. Bruce actually was the first superstar photographer to shoot on Ocean Drive. He was looking for local models to fill in with some of the big models that he had brought from New York. He cast Tim Schnellenberger, whose father is Howard Schnellenberger, the famous football coach. That was a hard booking to do because we had to get everything okayed by Coach because there were nude bodies on the top of the Breakwater Hotel. It really put Ocean Drive on the map. I discovered Christy Turlington, and she was the first superstar ever to come out of Miami. We discovered more and more very famous models. Charlize Theron came to me, and she was 17 years old. Allie Larder, Carolyn Murphy, Beverly Peel, Debbie Dickinson, Elsa Benitez, who we booked her for 13 covers and made her $1.3 million in 8 months, the fastest developed girl in the industry. We had Josh Holloway, of course. So many girls, so many guys. Once Bruce Weber started coming down here, a lot of the other big, huge photographers said, oh, we've got to check it out. And Vogue shoots and Harper's Bazaar shoots and huge campaigns were shot here. There were 10, 14 Winnebagos lined up on Ocean Drive at any given day for years and years and years. And it was the hottest place in the world to shoot. It was amazing. More models, more Playboys, more clubs, more hotels, more restaurants because of the modeling industry. Everybody was following the beautiful people. You'd blink your eye and people were buying up properties for nothing. Tony Goldman, he started buying up properties and he believed and saw the vision of this beautiful place that was never tapped into before. We had the real deal right there that people would come and see. Sly Stallone walking up and down between 8th Street and 10th Street looking at all the pretty girls. I mean, it was like one right after another. Naomi Campbell, Claudia Schiffer, Christy Turlington, all of them in a pack on rollerblades right down the middle of Ocean Drive. It was a sight. It just went so fast in those 10 years. It was unbelievable. The beach was on fire.
Early 90s. I was living in London. I came back to Miami. I realized that something was percolating here. It was magical. You had an amazingly interesting gay community, artist community. The final catalyst for this chemical reaction was the fashion industry. Fashion, when it came to Miami Beach, meant models. Models meant beautiful people. It was almost like you watch an episode of Baywatch and you're like, that doesn't look real. These people, people aren't that beautiful, but they actually were. And it'd be like unbelievable between the people, boys and girls, rollerblading and bicycling and walking and jogging. It's like, this looks like a movie set. It doesn't even look real. It just became on fire. It started to boil. That was really the beginning of South Beach. In 1968, my dad opened up the Forge restaurant because he said that he couldn't find a local restaurant that he really wanted to eat in. So he decided to create one that he would like. Fast forward to the early 90s, there was an opportunity to take over the restaurant, which I decided to do. I didn't want the Forge to miss this train called South Beach, and I wasn't actually in South Beach. We're a few blocks north of South Beach. Suddenly, we had a new demographic where the median age went from like 75 down to like 35. So I had a major challenge to reinvent the Forge. I remember in the early 90s, Mickey Rourke saying to me, I told him, hey, Mickey, I took over the Forge. And I said, I'll come in, I'll wait till Mother's Day, which was like 6 months away, and bring my mom in. And I went like, ouch. I have some work to do. So I said, how am I going to do this? I said, well, if I throw a party and I bring all the right people in for that party, everybody that's at that party will think that the Forge is like that every other night of the week. So I tried to pull a fast one. So I threw that party, and of course, I had Mickey and Sly and Michael Jordan and whoever was in town came to the party. The strategy worked because then people actually thought that the restaurant was like that on the other nights, and people started coming on the other nights as well. And so it took on a life of its own. This idea of integrating fine dining and entertainment worked because the city was starting to change, and because the city was thirsty, was starving for entertainment, partying, celebration. We really became known as one of the great party cities in the country. We were not known for that before. I think that South Beach has been, and still is on the cutting edge of entertainment now.
Every Saturday and Sunday, me and Gloria used to go to the beach. Beautiful beaches, great places. It was not too crowded, which it was nice. Going there every single weekend, we started falling in love with the whole place of Miami Beach, the whole flair. It was a fun place to be. And that was the beginning. The mini Ocean Drive started happening. Then the rest of the old hotel started remodeling and started getting back the whole flair of the tourists. But not only the tourists, local people. We love to go and have fun in Miami Beach and, better restaurants, better places. Starting to look fresh. Every single weekend, we used to pass by Star Island. I said, maybe one day we can save to live here. Remember, me and Gloria was two poor kids. At that moment, the music business, we got so lucky that, art would be coming hit after hit after hit. And one day we was coming from the beach. I told Gloria, let's go inside. And we found this place that I said, oh my God, we love this energy of this island. We love the energy of this house. And we made an offer, and the guy said yes, and we bought it. When we paid, it was $600,000. At the time, it was a lot of money. People told, you're crazy. How are you going to pay that much money for a house in Star Island? I said, well, we love the place. So you realize you spend $80 million now, it's worth maybe $60 or $70 million. You have to have the vision. That something is going to happen. The Cardozo was so special for us. When Gloria was a little kid, she used to be with her dad in Ocean Drive. And she told Dad, I'm going to buy that hotel for you one day.
Come here, I have pictures of myself right on that seawall, topless. Of course, I was only 3. Okay. And the hotel was right behind it, and it's kind of fun to now own this hotel. So I love the beach, and I always have.
Coming from Cuba, everybody said, we want to have Cuban food. And I told Gloria, we should buy a place and maybe just put a Cuban restaurant. People said maybe one will not work and, it will be tough to sell Cuban food. From the minute that we opened, that will be open almost 26 years now, we've been sold out almost every single night. And I would say now, millions of mojitos through all these 26 years of having Larios there.
We all know there have been 1,000,001 plans to rejuvenate Miami Beach, but I'll bet city fathers never thought of their backyard as a sun, fun, and gay capital.
Definitely Miami Beach was a place that welcomed, especially the gay community. Why? Because they brought so many great things for our city. They helped tremendously shape the shape of Miami Beach, fashion, magazines. That could have happened without the gay community. They brought to the world a lot of the elements. One thing I always said, I was born in Cuba. I love my country. I want always my country to be free. But, Miami Beach is home. It's home. It's where my kid was born. It's a place that welcomed me and Gloria and embrace us in such an incredible way. I think as an immigrant, you always want to pay back to a country and a place that, give you the opportunity to work and to, bring new ideas, new sounds, new food and everything. And I think Miami Beach definitely is a place, and especially South Florida, that opens to a lot of all this merge of different people from all over the world. You see so many problems now in the United States, and I say we're so lucky that we live in Miami Beach because, something, we are so diversified. On the same time, we have a pride that, that is the future for the rest of the country, that we all get along. Even when you said we celebrate the 100 years of Miami Beach, you felt the energy of celebration.
The late writer Damon Runyon wrote a letter to his friend Bill, a movie producer in Hollywood, to explain why he would not return to California to write a movie script, but instead would remain here in South Florida. He wrote, "The truth of the matter is, Bill, we've got sand in our shoes. It's pretty difficult to explain that to anyone who doesn't know what it means. It means a land covered with sunlight, warm and soft. It means white and pink houses with red and blue and green roofs. It means palm trees whispering mysteriously and tall melaleucas nodding their plumed heads to every breeze. It means big fat porpoises playing in Biscayne Bay and gaunt pelicans patrolling the sky at dusk, and folks fishing from bridges all day. Slim pale yachts and bustling motorboats, and hundreds of little sails fluttering like white butterflies over the water. Big, smug liners and the battered freighters, friendly faces in never too big a hurry, and the skyline of the city with twinkling lights embroidered against a velvety moon glow. It means Lincoln Road and gaily dressed people on its sidewalks and going to see the pictures you make out there in Hollywood, Bill. Turquoise blue waters of the ocean, lapping white beaches, and always the sun shining down in kindly warmth. Always the sun, Bill. It means laughter in the sunlight and romance under a big moon. Bill, sand in your shoes means, well, it means sand in your shoes. That's what it means. Damon, what it really means is Miami Beach.